Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Kalyi, and today we're going to be talking about the Stanley Milgram experiment and what can we learn from it all these years later in the present day. So Stanley Milgram was an American psychologist who was working at Yale University, and he was very influenced by the effects of the Holocaust in World War II. Specifically, he was wondering how ordinary German citizens could commit extremely negative acts on people who were their former neighbours, such as loading them into trains to take them to the concentration camps, ushering them into the gas chambers in the camps, helping them take off their clothes and then turning on the gas. And he was also interested in the trials that were starting 3 months before he did this experiment in Nuremberg. And one of the main defences of these ordinary citizens when they were on trial for their actions was, I was just following orders. So Stanley Milgram was wondering whether it was only German people who could do these kind of acts, or could other people in other countries also do these seriously negative acts just because they were told to do so by authority. So in 1961, he designed this experiment, and he was testing for levels of obedience to authority figures. Initially, he recruited 500 men. He put an ad in the paper offering $4 for 1 hour of their time, and he was trying to get a representative cross-section of the community. So men were aged between 20 and 50, and he tried to get a lot of different types of men. So when they turned up to the experiment, they were greeted by a man in a white lab coat who explained to them that the study was about memory and learning. Unbeknown to the participants, this was actually an actor in a lab coat, but they assumed that he was a scientist. So one of the participants was given the role of teacher and the other was given the role of student. So the student was taken into another room, and the experimenter and the teacher watched him being hooked up to electrodes, but there was actually no electricity in these. They looked real, they were probably real, but the electricity was turned off during the experiment. So the experimenter explained to the teacher that he would read out pairs of words to the student, and then the student would repeat back the pairs of words from memory. And he was given this instrument that looked like an electrical box that had a range of switches labelled from 15 volts to 450 volts. And this box also had no electricity running through it. But the teacher, the participant, didn't know that. He thought that electricity was running straight from the box through the wires into the student in the other room. And 450 volts is a lethal electrocution if you gave that many volts to someone. There were labels under some of the switches, such as extremely dangerous, and the very last one just had 3 X's, which was indicating that it was fatal. And whenever the student got a pair of words wrong, they remembered them wrongly, then the teacher would give them an electric shock. And every time they made another mistake, the electric shock had to be increased. So the student, who was an actor, was screaming and begging the participant, the teacher giving the electric shocks, to stop because it was really painful. And all of the participants were uneasy about giving electric shocks to the student simply because they were making mistakes in their memory with repeating pairs of words. And so a lot of them would complain to the actor who was acting as the experimenter. And the experimenter was given 4 prompts to give to the teacher if they complained. The prompts were: please continue. The experiment requires you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. And you have no other choice. You must go on. So the teachers were uneasy, but the results were very surprising. Every single participant who was a teacher gave the student up to 300 volts of electricity simply for making a simple mistake. And the percentage of people who gave the lethal electrocution to someone who was simply making mistakes with memorizing pairs of words was 65%. So 65% of ordinary people would essentially kill someone for making mistakes reading pairs of words just because they were told to by an authority figure. So these results show that it wasn't just the German citizens who would be coerced to go along with unjust laws by authority figures and harm other people in the country, but the Americans also did it. So these results suggest that it's human nature rather than specific to the German people, that really it could have happened in any country. So what can we learn from the Milgram experiment all these years later? One of the most important things that came out of that experiment is that we have to be careful not to follow rules and laws simply because authority tells us to. Some people think that laws hold the highest moral value simply because they're laws. But all of the things that happened to the Jews in Nazi Germany were enacted into law. It was all legal. And we all know that people who tried to help the Jews were often arrested and punished, and sometimes even sent to the concentration camps themselves. Legalizing slavery and apartheid are also wrong. So clearly, something can be legal and yet highly immoral. If you feel in your heart and in your conscience that a law is wrong, then you need to question that law. Martin Luther King, who fought very hard to overcome apartheid in America, had this quote. He said, "One has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws." Laws are only as good as the people who enact them. So if there is a regime who wants to push a negative agenda and they enact laws around that agenda, then those laws are going to be unjust and immoral. From a spiritual point of view, our heart and our conscience is the divine part of us. So if you're unsure about a law because your conscience is telling you it's wrong, you really need to look into that, as the higher moral standard. It's also important to identify any racism or negative judgments of other people that you may hold. If you think that some people are beneath you because of the colour of their skin or their religion or their beliefs, then you need to be aware of that. The propaganda machine in Nazi Germany was working overtime to convince people that the Jews were subhuman and evil and deserved the horrific genocide that was going on. And this is the same in every war. The enemy is always portrayed as being inferior and bad in some way. But this is really a classic divide and conquer tactic to make people fight among themselves, cause divisions. We have to be careful not to be manipulated into these kind of behaviours of criticising, harshly judging and abusing other people because authority is telling us to, encouraging us to. If we do this, we can be blindly led down a very dark path by authority figures who don't have our welfare as their highest agenda. And the final point to look at is probably the most difficult, and that's to not go along with authority when you feel something is wrong simply because you're afraid of getting into trouble or being punished. This is very understandable, but there's a famous quote by Edmund Burke. He says, "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is that good people do nothing." And it's very true. If you stay silent when you see things happening that you know are wrong, or you do the wrong things yourself, even if they're legal, then this is not going to help your soul evolution. It's difficult to do when you're afraid, but be aware of it. And in situations where we're afraid, we have to go to the divine part of ourselves and find the courage to speak or act in accordance with our conscience and our heart. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for listening. If you would hit the like and subscribe buttons, I'd really appreciate your support. And wherever you are in the world, I wish you love and courage in your journey. And I'll see you next time. Take care and bye for now.